Thank you for joining us. This is the Surface Transport edition for the Venari Podcast. My name is Gov Kandola, and I'm joined not only today, but for a four-part series with Lee Sander. Lee will be very well known to our audience. He is the former president of the Americas for Bombardier, former CEO for New York MTA, and also former senior director for National Express. Lee, how are you?
I'm doing very well, Gov. Thank you. And yourself?
Not too bad at all. I think we just mentioned it's a wet and windy day, both here in London and in Connecticut. So we're trying to make the best of it. But as you said, we're moving in the right direction in regards to the pandemic, which is brilliant. I really appreciate you being part of this series. When we discussed originally, we wanted to do something, in regards to transit in North America, the impact it's had on it, the post-pandemic outlook, but also in terms of the Biden infrastructure plan. And the impact that will have on the transit within North America as well. So for part one for this series, I think we'll have a review of really, I would say, the impact of transit in North America during the COVID period over the past year. It'd be great to get your insights into that and how you feel COVID has really impacted the transit over the past year.
So the impact of COVID on transit in North America was profound. I would say that it impacted transit as much as any other sector, and probably more other than the health sector. Just a very dramatic impact. The first impact was the human trauma. It took a terrible toll on both the frontline and the executives in these transit agencies. It turns out that frontline transit workers were impacted more in catching and dying from COVID 3 times more than other frontline workers. In New York, for example, 136 employees from the MTA died from it. It's estimated that 25% of the workforce caught it. And it wasn't just frontline staff. Very sadly, a colleague, friend of mine, Ray Kinney, who was the acting president of the Long Island Railroad when I ran the MTA, and most recently was senior vice president for operations in New Jersey Transit, caught it while he was inspecting facilities and died from it. And the CEOs of New Jersey Transit, the Port Authority of New York, and MTA all caught it. Thankfully they survived. But these agencies almost didn't function because of the impact on the people. And so just huge trauma from that. Then secondly, just a major impact, while this has been in the press, on ridership. Ridership plummeted to 95% from pre-pandemic levels. It's now beginning to recover, and subways are up to 40% pre-pandemic, commuter rail 25-30%. Buses were hit less hard, they're around the 50% range. So a significant impact on ridership. And then consequently, the financial impact on these institutions, on these agencies, has been powerful, very negative. First, there's a high dependency on fare box revenue. Some of these agencies are particularly dependent on fare box revenue, such as Toronto, such as New York, the bigger cities. And so they were, clobbered from that. And then on top of it, there are other revenue streams, the real estate tax revenues impacted by COVID and other revenues that support these agencies directly, and they have been impacted as well. So, bottom line, the agencies have been hit exceptionally hard, both in Canada and in the United States.
Certainly, those three major points that you've just pinpointed there, that's happened over the past year. And in your eyes, what are the challenges in dealing with these impacts as well?
So, there are huge challenges. There is a bright upside when you look longer term at transit from other drivers like climate change and equity and the need for cities at the end of the day to function in our society. But the challenge from transit to get there, to recover from this in terms of trust of the riders, of the customers, and then the financial model, and then innovating in this context, is very significant. So first, in terms of winning back trust, well, first from the staff, because of the trauma, there's a lot of healing that has to happen. You can't lose your colleagues, your leadership like this, and not have some healing and human connectivity to deal with that. Once you get past that, winning back the trust of the riders, some of the agencies are beginning to do good work in communicating that it appears that there's less exposure from touching the interior of the subway cars, and if people are wearing masks, they should be okay. But there's more that these agencies need to demonstrate to win back that trust there. And then from a financial perspective, the estimates are that transit will come back, within 2 years. McKinsey did a study that showed New York, for example, within 2 years, commuter rail back, 90% commuter rail, subways back, 90% commuter rail back, 80% roughly, but may not come back completely. And so financially, you need to come up with another model, and people may not be using their monthly passes, may not want a monthly pass or weekly pass with a hybrid, working model. So there will need to be a lot of thought to figure out, okay, how do we finance these systems that are crucial for the future of our downtowns, with these revenue streams and ridership different?
Definitely. I think that whole piece has got to be customer oriented in terms of really breaking down those barriers of worry, really, for the individuals who will be utilizing, the transit systems. I know for the Center for Disease Control, they brought out a study saying, I think it was in terms of catching COVID via contaminated surfaces, a 1 in 10,000 chance, which shows, the work that's been put in to ensure that we don't catch in this way. And of course, I think the Biden administration also announced last week that, extending face mask requirements across all transportation networks until September 13th, which I think is going to be vital for people to really have that comfort of getting back onto the transit systems and really utilizing them.
Exactly. So a huge amount of work, leadership that needs to be demonstrated, support at the political level, because that's where the leadership comes for the transit agencies at the federal level, at the state and local level, and then within the agencies themselves.
Definitely. So you yourself, are you optimistic the transit agencies are up to the challenge?
I think the human spirit in general has dealt with the pandemic very well in general, and I think the transit agencies know their future is on the line, and without their getting people, frontline workers, employees to downtowns, people recreating, without that, society doesn't function in large metropolitan areas. But overall, I'm optimistic with the leadership. I know obviously I've worked with a lot of leadership of these agencies, and when I think of them and the leadership they've demonstrated, I think they're up to it, Gov.
Amazing. That's exactly what I like to hear, and we're pushing forward for that as well. And I think in terms of this, it's incredibly insightful to get your thoughts on this. Being a former CEO of probably the largest transit agency across North America and globally as well. So I really appreciate your insight into this, but also it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts, which will be next week, really exploring the post-pandemic outlook for the transit systems moving forward. So I look forward to catching up with you on that.
Very good. Thank you so much, Gov.